the activism at one conversation earlier, you said it's like trying to be somewhere midway between where do I wish to be and what does my being support, what do I aspire to be, and today, what can I be living in this world?
Okay, we are live. How's your day going, Joel?
My day is going pretty good. I just spent a little bit of time with my 2.5-year-old daughter running around outside in the sun. And so I really appreciated that. Yeah, that's what's good about having my little girl in my life. She gets me playing more. So, yeah.
Oh, we could all use a little more of play in our lives, I think.
Yep.
I'll agree.
Joel has just gotten over an attack of COVID. So, yeah, it's just about recovering. Good that he was able to join us today.
Yeah, that's great. I'm glad you're okay, Joel. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar. Can you let us know where you're joining from? We'd love to see where people are participating from. And we have Katie from Houston, Pavan from Mumbai, Rajat from Delhi, Rajan from Noida, Meryl from the US, Saad from Chennai. Wow. Joel, are you seeing this? Ram, are you seeing
I am, yeah, I'm looking. It's great. Yeah.
Awesome, isn't it? Matt from London, Dr. Wafi from Germany. It's great. We have an amazing audience. They're super engaged and they're going to be possibly asking questions and participating in the discussion with you as you go along. And I know Ram and you will be keeping an eye a little bit on the chat in case you need to take some questions or whatever. I'll also be there. So welcome everyone. I just want to welcome you again. And today we have the co-founder of Kocharya, Ram, with us, and joining us today as a very special guest, Joel Monk. Joel is the founder of Coaches Rising. Isn't that right, Joel? Coaches Rising you also provide online coach training to people. Can you tell us a little bit about what you're doing there? And also want to thank you for being here. Thank you for taking the time out and being here. And I will go off camera and let you take over, Ram.
So, I mean, if you notice something on the chat that we are missing, just do prompt us.
Absolutely.
If you could, yeah.
I'll be here.
Yeah, over to you, Joel. I mean, just to say that, obviously, welcome you. Joel and I had a quick chat earlier today, sort of align ourselves and more than anything else, Coaches Rising is probably one of the most popular podcasts around. And together we had a dialogue, I don't know, some months ago. And one of the things I've been waiting for an opportunity to have a dialogue with him on the Kocharya Forum. So yeah, tell us a little bit about you, Joel, and then we can start off our dialogue.
Sure. Yeah, so, well, let me start by saying I'm really pleased to see all these people calling in from around the world. I'm a huge fan of coaching and what coaches can do, what they can be a vehicle for in the world. So, and I think right now, if we just look around the world with everything going on, we need all the support we can get. So that's one of the things that really moves me. I have just a deep passion for this mysterious, beautiful thing called the human life and how it can unfold and we grow. And so I've dedicated a lot of my life into how can we support coaches? How can we understand this path, this miraculous path? So I'm a coach myself. I've coached hundreds of leaders now. I love working with creative entrepreneurial leaders, and so I'm a coach, but also, as was mentioned, I'm a co-founder of Coaches Rising, and I'd say we kind of mainly offer like continuing coach education, and we really love to. We have thousands of coaches who come through our programs every year, and what we really love to do is to take a subject that we feel is really pertinent for coaches. For example, embodied somatic coaching, and how can we bring together a collection of pioneers and thought leaders in that area and create a kind of integrated learning journey for coaches to go on. So, and we like taking what we feel are like emerging themes in the field of coaching. How can we bring them from the edge right into the center? For example, we've got a current program, The Power of Presence, running. What's this role of presence in transformation? How can we leverage and harness presence in the work we do to bring more depth? So yeah, we're a kind of a company that really cares about the thriving of coaches, and we can speak more about that as we talk. Yeah.
Thanks, Joel. And I did tell you that I was going to ask you this question before we get serious about the subject that we are going to talk about. Why is Coaches Rising called Coaches Rising? Rising about what? Rising against what? Rising for what? Towards what?
Yeah, it's a good question. And yeah, you did prepare me. You would ask me this. It's funny because I'd recently looked back. We wrote a manifesto when I met my co-founder of Coaches Rising, Lawrence Van Arle. That was in 2008. We met in an Integral Coaching Canada workshop, and there was only about 8 people there. It was before they really grew their presence in Europe, and we met and we kind of fell in love around our passion for coaching and personal transformation. And quite quickly, we decided to create a company online. And I remember writing a manifesto, and the manifesto was all about what I just said. We believe in the power of coaches, the work that coaches can do in our times, what coaching stands for as a vehicle for transformation, for helping us thrive in these complex and crazy times. And so the name Coaches Rising really was born from our desire to further the field of coaching, to empower the world's coaches. So that's really where it comes from, Coaches Rising. And I must admit, we didn't actually come up with the name. We talked with someone who, after we told him everything we cared about, he was a bit of a genius like that. He just came up with the name, and immediately we were like, that's it. That's the name. So it stayed. And yeah, really, I want to underscore, like everybody who's here, who's a coach and who's committed to their own development and sincerity around this practice that we call coaching, they have a soft spot in my heart, and we're needed right now.
Yeah, thanks, Joel. And in a way, it does connect with what I really wanted to dialogue with you today. And we briefly spoke about it. And for the audience, I mean, today, it's not about teaching you any skills or even helping you to find any or finding a solution. I think what Joel and I planning to talk about, what emerges, we have no idea what it would be. It's not about finding any solutions, but perhaps look at what is it as coaches we need to do today and tomorrow, perhaps. What Otto Scharmer calls emerging future, contributing towards it in terms of what's happening around us. And one of the things I would really like to have Joel's views on, and also perhaps as many of you as can contribute on the chat, is, we all talk about ethics of coaching. I don't even know anymore what these mean, really. Of course, I know verbatim what it is. Privacy, confidentiality, all that kind of a stuff. And if you want to extend it a little further, the Rogerian philosophy of client centricity, unconditional positive regard, empathy, congruence, and all that stuff. But today, the shape our world is in, pretty much 80% of us, as Sharma says again, and Thierry, you, our eyes are closed, our mind is closed. If few of us, if you are able to open our minds, our hearts are closed, and very often our wills are closed. All this is happening around the world. What can we do? Okay, fine. If there's a tiny virus which is causing or has caused over the last couple of years and still causing, and perhaps would continue to cause for a while, all this havoc, maybe we don't have the wherewithal to do anything about it. But if 80 years after the last great war that this world witnessed, and there is another one in the making, which could potentially be a nuclear holocaust if it's allowed to go the way that it's going now, what are we doing about it? Are we, as coaches, expected to have something more or contribute more towards restoring some kind of peace and harmony and good in this world today? Or because it's not there? The coaching ethics obviously do not say anything about what you do in terms of war, or there's a conflict around what is it that you're expected to say. And therefore, oh no, I have not taken that oath of ethics or whatever it is, and therefore it's nothing to do with me. If there is something called morality, a larger imperative, that's got nothing to do with me. And I'm not saying that all of us are thinking like this, but the point is, another good friend of mine, also Joel, Peter Hawkins, very often asks this question when he talks about systemic work. What were the coaches doing when the banks were burning? Today, it's just not the banks which are burning. Cities are burning. Hundreds and thousands of people are getting killed. And so what the hell are we as coaches, are we doing about it? Should we be doing anything, first of all? Is it going to get us into trouble? Should we persuade the respective organizations that we perhaps belong to say, hey, say something about it? Politically, maybe incorrect, but morally, humanly, maybe correct. Those are some of the questions I would like to address. And then what is this attitude portent for the future? Are we going to stand up in front of, Joel was just mentioning about 2.5-year-old daughter. Are we going to tell her, my granddaughter is 7 years old, and 2 other grandchildren at 5 years, 8 years old and 5 years, and am I going to tell them this is what I did? Hid myself in my bathroom when something was happening around in the world? What are we here as coaches about? Over to you, Joe.
I mean, I laugh there because, there's so much in what you shared, and actually I'm heartbroken too, so my, I feel conflicted. Like there's so much, it's so big, this topic, isn't it? And maybe as we speak, we can distill it down into something that becomes more elegant and workable for us. And I shared this with you earlier, Ram. I'm here today as a practitioner, as a learner, as somebody that is living into an inquiry myself. Where do we start? So let me just start by saying, it's hard right now. Yeah. It's like as you've named, everything going on in the world. Yeah. It's so complex. And it feels to me like we are in the midst of a transition where our old sensibilities, our old institutions and beliefs and principles are being questioned and crumbling, many of them breaking down in the face of the uncertainty that we're up against. And so we're living inside of that, like each of us. And so it's not easy to find answers right now. There are no simple answers to any of the questions that I think you're posing. That's why I think it's most important for me right now to be actually living inside of the questions more than finding the answers. So these questions that you're posing, very, very heartfelt questions and eloquently, that to me is actually one answer. Your answer. It's like that's what we should be doing right now, Ram. So I'm appreciating what you're doing. And what else do I want to say on this? I've lost my train of thought again. So I was saying we're in this, it's complex and crazy right now. And I do feel that the danger is, when you say, like, what are we supposed to do ethics with coaching? I'm conflicted around that. What were the coaches doing when there was a 2008 crash? It's a great question. And, on the one hand, it's a provocative question and it should be asked. On the other hand, what was I doing at that time? I was actually right at the beginning of my coaching journey, but I can understand that people weren't necessarily challenging the bankers that they were working with in the City of London or the CEOs and executives, because we're all living inside of our own needs. You think of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I'm dedicated to my purpose in the world, and I want to speak more about that in a moment, how I think that can be one of the answers to some of your questions. But so I have this sense of purpose and this sense of being called to serve in these times, and a sense of ethics. But I also have a young family, and I want to put food on the table, and sometimes these decisions I make around that are all aligned, and sometimes they're conflicted. And I like to think probably that I'm more ethical than I am. I think that perhaps we're all like this in some way, that I have a certain espousal around the ethics that I live by, and then there's a gap between what I actually do and what I think, what I say I'll do. So and just to kind of like start to bring this all together. So it's complex right now, and many of us are asking, what should we do? And I think there's a lot of polarization in the world. And my danger, and this is what I say about that question, what were the coaches doing when the banks went down in 2008 and there was this crash? Well, the danger is we start to become an activist, and we polarize even more, and we start to say to certain people, you were wrong and that was bad, and yet we're disowning how we are like those people, and in doing so we create more division and more separation. So I think part of the answer is in that we are being invited to evolve, and that there is a kind of post-egoic place that we can begin to come from, a place of humility and service, where I can find my place in the ecology of life and how I want to respond. And I think that's one of the ways, in the face of everything that we're up against, that we can begin to orient, like what's my work here? Because not everybody's Greta Thunberg, for example. So what's my work here? I said a lot there, and I'll see if it makes sense to you, Ram, and I'll volley it back to you and see what you say.
Yeah, first of all, let me thank you and I appreciate the honesty with which you express yourself. And like earlier, we had this conversation, and I mentioned to you, I'm 75, and my expiry date is not too far. So I can afford to probably, if I choose to, stand in front of a tank and offer a flower as a little girl did in China or whatever, not caring whether I'm going to be alive or dead. But you and many others with far greater responsibilities in terms of life that you have to pursue. I think it's a far, far more difficult, a dilemma, a conundrum for many of you. And I totally, totally appreciate that. Therefore, at one level, the activism at one end of the spectrum, not only it's not for all of us, and it may not even be the right solution because it tends to antagonize many other people. That kind of very idealistic opposition to something that is happening and doesn't really very often serve any purpose. On the other side, other end of the spectrum, just being silent and slothful and with closed mind, closed heart, and closed will, as Shyama says, that's not going to do anything as well. And so there is perhaps somewhere in the middle that we need to find a way, something which is wiser, a third truth, as it were. And I think in our conversation earlier, you said it's like trying to be somewhere midway between where do I wish to be and what does my being support, what do I aspire to be, and today, what can I be living in this world? And I totally agree. It's an extremely, extremely difficult question to answer. So yeah, I get torn with this many times. I mean, 30 years ago, it was all about wealth and power for me. And today it's about something extremely different. And my own life and survival is not as important as it would have been 30 years ago or 20 years ago. But that's not the same for everyone. And I do appreciate that wherever we want to put coaches into, I don't think coaching means that we all need to be saints. No, it's not. We got to live our life and we have to be honest with ourselves and do whatever best we can. But the question really that I'm trying to raise here is, what does it take for us as coaches to be involved in social transformation, which might include political transformation, it might include spiritual transformation or whatever it is? Can we at all do anything about it? Or do we say, hey, no, we are here, our job is to evoke awareness. And does that awareness lead to consciousness? And if it does, how does it impact transformation? Or is it only relevant if we are sitting in front of a paying client and at that point in time, the evoking awareness is fulfilling us, but beyond that, it doesn't. I don't know. I honestly don't know the answer to the question. So, and I'm not here trying to say, hey, this or that or whatever it is. Each one of us has to make our own decisions. So I volley that back to you.
Yeah, and it, the question that comes, and I can maybe pose this at the end, is like, oh, there's something in you that there's something that you're seeing, and in a way you're speaking about all of that today, about what's happening in the world, what you see in the coaching community, but there's some intelligence inside of you that's having you hold this inquiry with passion, and that I think is important and significant, because following that is what could lead to perhaps some kind of exponential transformation in the community that you hold. That I think that's perhaps where there's if I look at the world right now and I think of incremental change, and I think, how are we going to do this with climate change and the war in Ukraine and the geopolitical fallout of that, and hey, we're just getting over this pandemic, we're not really over that yet. I wanted a bit of a time out and a break, but I'm not going to get that now because This event in Ukraine is incredibly impactful and heartbreaking. And so, sorry, I keep losing my train of thought. I think it's because I had my last, I only had 4 hours of sleep last night, 4 to 5 hours of sleep because of my daughter. So what I'm wanting to say is I've completely lost it. You come back to me, Ram. Maybe you can respond to my question.
No, sure. Yeah. I mean, look, the point is, I'm going through something in the chat as well. George speaks about what would Gandhi do, or Martin Luther, or Nelson Mandela, etc. Perhaps not every one of us can do something similar to, like you said, Greta Thunberg. Yeah, a young girl able to stand up and say what she does is something remarkable. All of us may not have the ability to be able to do that. And something here, I think it's Pekka, 63-year-old, and says, the future that I see once it's been born, which means Pekka is optimistic about that it's being born, and it's going to be beautiful, simple, and we all hope so. Actually, we all hope so. And Arun is talking about the circle of influence. Now, possibly one thing that we can do in between that space of activism and the state of complete ignorance about what is happening, is to create, like what I'm putting in here, as a circle of influence, in terms of at least generating an awareness in terms of what this could potentially lead to. I mean, rather than getting into any kind of a protagonist, antagonist kind of situation, who's right, who's wrong. And history is often that way, that whoever at the end of the day is a victor, that person is always a protagonist, the hero. And the other one who's been defeated is, so the history would have been rewritten if Hitler had won the war in the 40s. So all these things are very, very different after the event. Morals, ethics, and everything change. But at this point in time, is it a possibility for us to create a greater awareness what this could potentially lead to, a nuclear holocaust, for instance? Or what is it that it can potentially lead to in terms of that beautiful space that we can all hope to be able to experience? So that's another way of looking at it, I guess.
I remember what I wanted to say, like this idea of exponential change. I think that if we look at like this idea of incremental change, it can feel like impossible that we will get to where we need to be in order to make it as a species and as a planet. And yet I feel that there's this idea of like exponential change, and that these huge breakthroughs can come. And if you look at the fall of communism in Eastern Europe, for example, it happened in 2 or 3 countries over the space of 24 hours or 48 hours. That was unplanned. You couldn't coordinate that. And I think this kind of breakthrough change can start to happen. And that's where I think we can start to have some hope potentially. And you said like, do coaches want to be, catalysts of social change? I think they are, yeah. Like in one fundamental way, they already are, in that if you are in a relationship with someone and you are helping them to grow, to become self-aware, to become more spacious, more present, then that is a kind of social activism. Yeah, you're supporting that person. They're going out, and there's a ripple effect into the people that they know. And there is not enough demand right now for the amount of coaches that we need in the world. The demand outstrips the supply. So in one fundamental sense, I feel that we are agents of social change. Now, the question of like, how much do we want to bring in, climate change into the coaching room? How much do we want to bring in the conflicts that are taking place? I have friends who are working in think groups around the potential for societal collapse. And they actually get the support of coaches, because some of the people working in those groups burn out, because they're big topics, and it can be very confronting. And so I bring that in because I don't know. I'm inquiring right now. I'm like, do we want to be nice on the one hand? Do we want to be saying like, no, we're not going to confront our coaching clients. We're not going to upset them by bringing in the reality of what we're facing in terms of the political instability, climate change, and so on? Or do we say, no, we actually, this is a reality, and we might find it scary to really turn and face this, but we collectively need to do so. So let's actually acknowledge that and bring it into the space, and by doing so, that might enact the transformation that we're needing. So, and I just don't think, in a way, maybe it's even, I think people are waking up now. It's like, for example, with the conflict in the Ukraine, we've been in this 20-30 year period where we felt like everything was going pretty well, but it was a kind of an illusion, and it's a very complex story. But like, it feels like we're in a different time now, and I think it's just everybody's confronted with it, and it's just so coaches now need to be supporting people to meet this complexity and uncertainty anyway. So that's kind of where I come. I think, like, ethically, it's like maybe our ethics right now is that we need to be equipped in order to support people through these huge disruptions that are taking place.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, Joel. That's certainly what we need to do. As someone, Vivek and others have pointed out, it's not about taking sides. It's not about being judgmental, but under the circumstances, even that's perhaps not what everybody wants to be done. What is it that we can do slightly differently, which then sort of leads to something else that you said, is there's a far greater demand for coaching, and there's a shortage of people who are coaches, and there are far more in terms of people who need coaching. And unfortunately, that deficit happens to be with people who need it the most vulnerable, the most in need of that kind of a support. Now, I'm sure there are many of us who devote a part of our time to do these kind of things, what we might call pro bono coaching and so on. And so I'm moving away, not for reason of anything else, but to make this more practical in terms of doing something that we can do to influence, rather than say, hey, we can all work towards stopping the war or change the climate, whatever. I don't think any of us are going to be able to do that in quite a long time. These things are going to take time. But we as coaches can democratize the practice of coaching. We can make it available. We can make it affordable. And there are many more ways that we can sort of propagate coaching than having to necessarily have to have a label of this and that, 3-letter and 4-letter labels and so on and so forth, which then sort of guarantees a certain amount of revenue and so on. My belief is that anybody and everybody can be a coach. Everybody can be a coach, can be a healer, can be a leader. And this is something that we can do as coaches. And I think to a large extent, something that you are doing through your podcast, which is free and reaching out to many people, like what we have now, maybe 100 over people are here. In some of the programs, maybe there are more number of people. And if each one of them then talk to 10, and those talk to another 10, and so on and so forth, would it be possible to expand the space where in some way or other, that we call coaching, which we are trying to help people to have greater awareness about themselves and reach their greater potential and so on and so forth, can that be made in a much greater democratic sense. So, but that's something that we can all do. We don't have to necessarily give up anything. We can probably devote 20% of our time or 30% of the time without losing sleep over it, without losing wealth over it. So can we get that in some way templatized? Can we get that some way standardized and structured and so on and so forth? Be able to, for me, that's a dream that we would be able to do it with Kocharia at some point in time. So yeah, I just would like to have your thoughts and that of the audience as well.
Yeah, I just saw a question as well about how can we make coaching more affordable from Tanisha. I mean, I think it's a really important inquiry, you know, like, of course, coaching can perhaps seem elitist at times. I know you've shared that thought as well, Ram, with, and then, you know, in certain parts of the coaching industry, it's like, how can you raise your fees and raise your fees? And so I don't have any answers to this one. Like, of course, you know, one practical answer is something like team coaching, where suddenly you can reach, you know, a group of people rather than just one. But I think this is one of the issues with coaching, is that it's scalability, isn't it? It's like it's a one-to-one relationship, and that's something that makes it really beautiful too. You know, that's like, I love team coaching, but I love being one-on-one in those conversations with people. So it's not to say that that's bad. It's an incredible thing. We can transform people's lives and create relationships with incredible meaning. But it's like, is that enough right now? Do we need something more scalable? And I think there are certain hybrids, you know, possible. And I think it's worth parsing out the difference between coaching as a way of being, you know, as a form of relationship that people have had perhaps throughout millennia in different forms, you know, and then the coaching industry, coaching as a business. Because I think they're obviously they're very connected, but I think coaching as a way of being is something that's starting to really proliferate in so many ways into society. You know, what is it to be in an empowering relationship? And this explosion in interest in mindfulness and self-help and yoga and meditation, you know, it's so I think it will naturally start to become part of societies more, as communities more, as we naturally take on these ways of being. And yet, yeah, like, how could we make coaching more affordable? How can we democratize it? You know, because just to say that there is also a commoditization of coaching taking place, which, you know, is a similar trend. You know, coaching prices are going down, coaches are getting paid less. Even I've heard people use this term like the McDonaldization of coaching, where some coaches are suddenly getting paid $30 an hour, and so, you know, and so I want coaches to be paid well as well. I want coaches to be. So I don't have another answer to you other than that. Yeah, I feel called to give away some of my coaching pro bono, and to you know, we've had people reach out to us involved in the Ukraine conflict, saying, how can you connect us with other coaches who speak Ukrainian or Russian who could support, you know, in small ways like this. But I think this is probably what's coming. Yeah, the business of coaching itself is going to be disrupted through technology, wearables, AI, all kinds of things. And yeah, there'll be some good things about that. There might be some painful things too.
Yeah, well, whether it's $30 an hour or whether it should be $100 an hour, anyway, it all depends on where you are and
right,
what the living standards are. In many countries, $30 an hour could be a huge amount, maybe not in others. So those are the differences that we have. That's one part of it. But another one that we had also earlier discussed was about, if you look at parts of the society which are vulnerable, apart from, of course, regions like now perhaps Ukraine and something else, but in general, it's really the younger people, the population, maybe the very old people, and women in particular. These are traditionally, hierarchically, have been the weaker sections of society. So now, what I think the other day, I don't remember who it was, but I was talking to a coach, and this person was saying that, you know what, I've been doing this work with these school leaving children who are going into college or first years of college or last years of school and so on and so forth, somewhere around the age of 18 plus minus. And even the little bit that I'm able to offer them in terms of for them to help define their future, in terms of finding a purpose, why they should do what they should be doing, it seems to be making a great difference. And if it does make a difference, and they are going to be adding more value in their own lives and through their lives to other people, what an enormous amount of that leveraging effect, expanding effect, that is going to change, that's going to happen. The same thing can be done. Somebody pointed out here, and I truly believe that there is a lot of negativity about business and corporations. I don't believe that, having spent a large amount of my life in corporates. There's a tremendous amount of goodness and power that can be leveraged from the corporates. And there are many companies today who are willing to listen to how they can use part of that in terms of a larger societal improvement as well, because they are recognizing that without that, in the longer term, there isn't going to be any sustainability. So in order to be sustainable, they have to be contributing back into the environment. So things are gradually changing. Now, if we can put all these together, let's say, for instance, like you said, team coaching does not mean that they should not be individuals, but not all individuals may require that coaching. And team coaching is certainly, even if it's $30 now, if there are 10 people, it's $300 now, you are spending the same amount of time. And so there are multiple ways in which we can restructure the way that coaching is being offered today. And can it be offered to young people? Can it be part of the academic curriculum? We have talked about it in this forum before. Professor Laurie Santos, she runs this program called Science of Wellbeing in Yale, most popular course from what I understand, fine, leaving behind the issue that Yale is very elitist and so on, it's an Ivy League. But the same thing can be done everywhere. Today, that course is available free on Coursera. I have taken that course. Many others I know I have recommended they take that course. There are many ways in which coaching can be made available to people in whatever form. It doesn't have to be this traditional way of the competency model this way and that way or whatever it is. We can redefine those competencies. Competencies do not make a coach. It's a mindset which makes you a coach. And the skill is just one small part of that larger framework. I mean, to redefine competencies, to me, there are only 3 major competencies, apart from the ethics of coaching, client centricity, which is about contracting, communication, and concluding in action. That's all. And you can sort of make it into 8, you can make it into 85, it doesn't matter. These are the 3 key things that you need to have. So why don't we focus on it? So these are some of the thoughts which we can practically implement and start changing people's mindset if everybody puts our mind to it.
Yeah. I just thought when you were speaking about the role of education for young people here, I think that's where, we're talking about what we really need, is we don't want to be rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic here. We need to be radically reinventing society right now. It's like it feels like the only kind of solutions that are going to cut it. And I'm just thinking of schools. Imagine if in schools they taught, this industrialized schooling system, which, is just so outdated. Many of the subjects are just going to be irrelevant by the time our children are out of school. Imagine if and I know this is happening in places too, so I'm painting maybe too strong a picture, but yeah, imagine if they taught about coaching children. They taught coaching to children in schools, the kinds of questions you could ask, the way of being. I saw Neha wrote, it all comes back to the being of a coach. If they taught children about the way of being of a coach in education, then we would see a societal transformation. I want to give you an example of that. A friend of mine, Thomas Bjorkman, he talks about how in Sweden, and I'm not great at remembering timeframes and dates, but so I can point people to he's got a book on this thing, but I think it's called the Nordic Principle. And basically in Sweden, 100 years ago, 150 years ago, they were very poor. Yeah? It's not the society they have there today. It was a poor society, a lot based on farming. And what they decided to create these institutions that young people would go to for 6 months to a year at a time. And they were basically kind of like coaching type institutions. Yeah. So the young people there would go and educate themselves in a way that they transform the whole society in a very short space of time. And so to me, that gives me hope in terms of how, where this democratization of coaching might come from. So I think that to me is a really big area. Like, and then I don't know if then coaching when we become adults will become defunct. I don't think so. I think it's just going to become ubiquitous in society. There'll be all kinds of coaches and all types of coaching. I think it's going to keep, I don't want to say fragmenting, but it's going to keep coming into different expressions of what coaching could be. Micro moments of coaching, AI coaching, wearables that give you in the moment feedback when you're with people, apps, of course, then coaches on call, on demand, your pastor in the church or in, whatever religious institution you attend has coaching skills. It's going to be proliferated.
Yeah, when you look at it, just to answer questions that somebody had raised, the program that I was talking about is a Coursera. It's a free program. Professor Laurie Santos, some of you can Google it and even now find out. It's called The Science of Wellbeing. And in parallel, there is another one, which I would recommend, Martin Seligman from UPenn. It's on positive psychology. These are wonderful courses. And they may be called by different names, but I think they all ultimately lead to them coming back to what you said, Joel, is, if you really simplify it, taking all the jargon out of it, all we are doing in coaching is really first listening in deep respect to the other person, which we rarely ever do. And that's the greatest skill that is needed in coaching. And so Edgar Schein so beautifully says in his book, The Humble Inquiry, and Otto Scharmer talks about the 4 levels of listening, moving into curious, empathetic, and generative listening, and so on and so forth. And followed by inquiring and asking rather than telling. That's all that needs to be. There's nothing else. And sure, in the beginning, you create an intent and you move into action. But the process of coaching is just as simple as this. How you do it in fancy footwork, somatic, ontological, this, that, what, these are different. But all that you need to do is to genuinely listen to the person with respect. Instead of letting your own mind get into the system, inner dialogues, and so on and so forth. If that basic skill, as it were, the mindset can be taught, Komal, I think, put down somewhere called, what is a guiding principle? That is all I would think is a guiding principle. Can we teach young people? Please listen, please observe. Not just to the words, but to the way the person is expressing in some way, the voice tone, the physicality, the body movements or expressions or whatever. And then without judging anything, can you just inquire into them? Hey, what's happening with you? Very empathetically, very generatively. And that's going to lead to something. And that's a way that we can support pretty much everybody. That's all that we need to do for coaching. We don't have to follow the whatever number of markers there are or competencies there are and so on and so forth. And this doesn't take much time if we keep repeating instead of just teaching people the 3 R's and so on and so forth. As part of it, if this can be taught, it can be the most powerful life skill. And that doesn't require anybody to give up anything. That alone can democratize coaching. So I'm hoping that in some way, if we keep people like us keep dialoguing about this, and people who hear us keep dialoguing about this in their own communities, that itself can spread. I don't think we need more and more of credentialing institutions. What we need really is a propagation of this principle and philosophy, how to listen and how to ask and inquire rather than tell, using that process to evoke awareness and then moving into action and fulfilling an intent. I mean, that's all that I can think of, honestly.
Yeah, beautifully spoken. And, I wish we could get you, Ram, in front of some of the people, that counts, and they could hear you say these things and, make some changes. That gives me hope, and I just felt into this topic we had earlier of like, what do we do? Like the ethics of a coach, how do we respond in these times? And I just felt into that question a bit more for me. And I wanted to say something about that, which is, I think, I come back to that phrase I said, like, what's ours to give in the ecology of life in these times? Like, what you could say, what's our purpose or our calling? And the invitation I want to make is that it can be and this is an invitation I make to myself. That's why I share it, because it's something I'm doing. It's like, I can feel as I'm swimming and sitting in the middle of everything that there's a part of me that wants to turn away, and it's afraid, and and that's okay. I'm embracing that. Like, that's okay for that to be here. And I can also feel something in me which is evoked, which is evoked by the very uncertainty and complexity of these times. It's like a visceral sense of being called to respond, an energy inside of me. And it's this place that I want to invite people to respond from. It's non-strategic. Yeah. It's not like we are determining a plan that we're going to go out and enact. I'm going to go and combat this group. It's a place that we can stand and speak from. And when we stand and speak in that place, we speak a truth, not the truth, but a truth. There is a transmission to that truth, and it touches people, and it can transform people. And I feel like that's the invitation I want to make for each of us on this call. I feel it inside of you, Ram. I feel it in you when you speak. That's why I said, like, where's this coming from in you? The passion you feel towards this inquiry, because this is what we need in the world. We need more people embodying this. And you said, you're older, maybe because you're 75, you feel more free to do that. I think there might be some truth in that, but I think this is, as a 42-year-old, this is what I'm being called into too. Where am I hiding away? Where am I afraid? Because if I speak up, I might be taken down, or I'm afraid that, I'm going to lose all the privilege and security and control that I have in my life. And so this is what I see in my community is also happening, and it's also perhaps the beauty of these heartbreaking times is we're being broken open, and that something can move through us, an intelligence, which I think is part of the solution of how do we respond. That intelligence has a wisdom and a compassion to it. So
that's absolutely amazing, Joel. It's the only question I have for you is, when you dialogue with people and you start with, I'm sure you don't start with details, like I don't. I have no idea what's going to happen in the dialogue, but there's clearly an intent with which we sort of focus during that, and perhaps coming back, like in this particular case, we are coming back to what can we do, okay, in all this that's happening around us, in order to help in some way, serve in some way. What is that thought which sort of makes you alive?
Well, this is something again that I want to invite others into thinking about. I noticed in my life, I was a DJ and an artist, and there was a certain feeling I got when I would be in a nightclub DJing to sometimes this is when I was very young, but I did quite well quite quickly. And then when I was in my studio making paintings and sculptures, there was the same feeling. And I was a community artist for a while, and I was working with refugees and young offenders, different groups. And and when I'm coaching and when I'm talking to people, it's the same feeling. It's like there's just the love of what is wanting to emerge in the moment. It's like a sense of awe and wonder about what can emerge. And in some way, I feel like I'm creating a container for that, and it's not something I'm trying to do per se, but as I've gotten older, I've noticed like that's just something inside of me that I've got, and you've got your own version of whatever that is, that essence of Ram that's beautiful. And so this is, I think, speaks to what I'm talking about as we dare to feel that call and to embody it, that unique expression of who we are in this lifetime. That's where I think the solutions will come from. As more and more people do that, then they will start playing their music. I mean, maybe it's a cliched kind of metaphor, but they'll start playing their own instrument in the orchestra. We all start playing together. And so when you ask me that question, that's what's alive for me in that moment. It's in some ways it's quite selfish in a way. I love doing it. I just enjoy it. But in another way, I feel called to like this is something I can do. Like I can bring that space and something good happens. So
let me follow this up with this other question. Since you are an artist, you said you are a sculptor, possibly a painter, and so on. So what is that vision that comes up for you when you say all this?
What's the vision of the world?
What's a vision, whatever it is, that as you think these thoughts, as you enter into a space where you are building that container for people to expand themselves in, for you to expand yourself in at the beginning of a podcast or whatever, what is the image that comes up for you in front of you?
It's a great question. I mean, I don't, and interestingly, I'm not sure. So this is great coaching, yeah, because you've got me on my edge here. Like it's not fully formed, yeah. It is an image, yeah. It is an image, but it's not like I sit and then pre-plan like, okay, I'm gonna do this. It's like a kind of embodied felt image of being a container, a conduit. Interestingly, and I've not really spoken this out before in this way. So this is an example of a beautiful question. And I think implicitly inside of that, Ram, is like an image of a better world in some way. I'm not trying. It's more like this philosophical notion of truth, beauty, and goodness. I think that's what it is. It's not like I'm trying to create a better world, because then that would put constraints on the outcome. There would be an effort in there. It's actually more a sense of like, yes, there's something truthful, beautiful, and good that comes from being in this place, and it's inherent for its own sake. I'm not doing it to get something from that. It's like it's just intrinsic. So
I just leave this thought with you. We just have a few minutes ago. I mean, you must have obviously heard, having been a sculptor, this quote about Michelangelo. What is it that you are trying to create? Whatever that is I'm trying to create, I'm ruining everything else so that image comes through. Yeah. So I knew as I asked you that question that you have an image. I knew that very well. But that image perhaps is not that clear to you today. And I leave the same thing with everybody else in this audience as well. Try and check what that image is going to be when you are engaged in that activity which you are passionate about. And that will probably give you the metaphor that you wish to be. It's as simple as that and as true as that. So I just leave it with this riddle at this point in time. We can talk about it later to get a greater sense of answer to it. But pretty much intuitively, I felt that as you expressed it, that you had something in front of you, an image, a vision, whatever. And certainly it's not clear all the time. But then if you just let it happen unconsciously, that vision image presents itself to you. And that's what you wish to be honest. And we can talk about it in terms of how I discovered it for myself at a later point in time. Okay, thanks a lot. Thank you, Joel. It's been wonderful. We've had almost about an hour of conversation. I'm sure we haven't solved anything, but I'm sure that there are a lot of thoughts that are left floating around. And even if it is something that we pick up, try and influence people around us in one way or another, that would be fantastic. So for last words from you, and Neha can close the session.
Just to say thank you, Ram, for I really appreciate being with you and with everybody. Again, I just want to say, coaches right now have an important role to play. So I just appreciate your sincerity, and the coaches I meet are so dedicated to their own learning, and they care about the craft, at least the ones I meet, and I really appreciate that. So journey well with that.
Thank you. Neha, over to you. Thanks for the audience. Thank you for your wonderful questions and suggestions and observations. Over to you, Neha.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for joining us and for the really heartfelt, beautiful comments, thoughts, feelings, experiences that you've shared, and to keep the conversation going. I think this is the critical part, right? That we keep the conversations going, that we keep talking about these things and keep them at the surface of our mind, not let it slip through in the day-to-day minutia. So I really appreciate everyone, and thank you so much, Joel, for joining us today and for having this conversation with us. Thank you, Ram.
Thanks a lot. Thanks, Neha. Thanks, Joel. Thanks all the audience. Thank you very much.
Bye, everyone. Have a great
Take
day,
care.
evening, morning.
All right,
Bye-bye.
bye, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.